Dr. Lena Carter had never been a believer in fate, but as she stared at the hieroglyphs adorning the crumbling walls of the Temple of Thoth, she felt a shiver crawl up her spine. The translation had been correct. The ancient texts spoke of paths through the stars and folding the heavens, ideas far beyond the imagination of a civilization that supposedly hadn't known of the wheel when these temples were built. For Lena, a theoretical mathematician who had spent her career exploring the boundaries of spatial dimensions, the discovery was electrifying. She had been invited to Luxor for a routine collaboration with archaeologists, but as she walked among the ruins, her trained eyes saw something that no one else had. The measurements of the temple's columns, the ratios of its walls to its ceilings, the angles of its corridors, they all hinted at something extraordinary. The equations she began sketching in her notebook were startlingly familiar. They bore an eerie resemblance to her own theoretical models for manipulating spacetime, equations that she had only recently begun to publish in obscure physics journals. But here they were, etched into stone thousands of years before Einstein's theories had been conceived. Lena wasn't superstitious, but the idea of a mathematical convergence between her work and an ancient civilization's architecture left her breathless. Back at her hotel room, Lena worked feverishly. She overlaid her equations onto the temple's blueprints, matching geometric ratios to mathematical constants. The deeper she dove, the more the evidence aligned. The temples weren't just structures, they were blueprints, and not for something symbolic. They were instructions for building something real. It was 3 a.m. when Lena made the breakthrough. Her fingers trembled as she plotted the final calculations into her laptop. The ratios encoded in the temple walls were precise instructions for stabilizing a wormhole, something modern physicists had theorized but never achieved. The temple dimensions acted as a tuning fork, aligning spacetime in such a way that a wormhole, once created, could remain stable without catastrophic collapse. "I must be losing my mind," Lena muttered, staring at the glowing equations on her screen. But the numbers didn't lie. The next morning, Lena returned to the temple with a portable experimental setup. She brought a compact particle accelerator, a high-frequency laser array, and a device she had rigged together in graduate school, a crude but functional quantum field stabilizer. Her heart raced as she calibrated the equipment. The first test was small, barely a blip of energy, but it confirmed her suspicions. When she aligned her equipment according to the temple's dimensions, the energy fields became unnaturally smooth, resonating in a way she had never seen before. It was as if the structure of the temple was amplifying and guiding the energy, creating a natural framework for her experiments. On the third test, the impossible happened. A shimmering, oval distortion appeared in the air before her. Lena's breath caught as she stared into the anomaly. It wasn't like the dramatic wormholes in sci-fi movies. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but there was no mistaking it, a tiny, stable wormhole. She reached for her camera, snapping photo after photo, then hesitated. What if this wasn't just a fluke? What if the temples were built for this exact purpose? Over the next few weeks, Lena's experiments grew bolder. She activated the wormhole again and again, each time increasing its size and stability. She began testing its properties, sending small objects, a pen, a coin, a laser beam, through the anomaly. Each item vanished into the distortion and reappeared a few feet away, completely intact. One evening, as the sun set behind the towering pillars of the temple, Lena decided to push further. She adjusted the equations, using additional dimensions she had previously dismissed as theoretical. Her calculations indicated that the wormhole could connect not just 2 points in space, but 2 points in time. When the wormhole stabilized this time, it was different. Instead of the faint shimmer she had grown accustomed to, the anomaly was larger and clearer, almost like a window. Lena stepped closer, her heart pounding as she saw something through the distortion, a city. The structures were unmistakably Egyptian, but they were pristine, unmarred by time. Golden obelisks gleamed under a sunlit sky, and figures in flowing linen robes moved purposefully through the streets. It wasn't just another place, it was another time. Lena's awe quickly turned to fear. She had to tell someone. But who? If she reported her findings to the scientific community, she would be dismissed as a lunatic. And if the wrong people found out? She shuddered to think what a weaponized wormhole could mean for the world. The only person she could trust was her old mentor, Dr. Elias Ward, a physicist with a penchant for the impossible. She invited him to Egypt under the guise of consulting on her work. Elias arrived 2 days later, his sharp eyes scrutinizing the temple and Lena's equipment. "You're not joking," he said after she showed him the photographs. "Lena, this could rewrite everything we know about physics. But it's dangerous. Too dangerous." "I know," Lena admitted. "But if the ancient Egyptians knew how to do this, then there's more to their knowledge than we've ever imagined. I need to understand how they discovered it, why they built these temples. And most importantly," she hesitated, "are they all dormant, or are some still active?" Elias stared at her for a long moment before nodding. "Then we have to proceed carefully. No government, no corporation can get their hands on this." Together, they expanded the scope of their experiments. Elias' expertise in quantum mechanics complemented Lena's equations perfectly, and within days, they had mapped out a network of temples across Egypt, each with dimensions matching the equations. It was clear that these weren't random structures. They were part of a system, a global network of dormant gates. One evening, as they worked late into the night, a shadow flickered across the temple wall. Lena froze, her hand hovering over her laptop. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Elias frowned. "What?" Before he could finish, a low hum filled the air. The wormhole, which they had powered down hours ago, flickered to life on its own. Lena and Elias exchanged panicked glances as the distortion grew larger, more defined. Through the anomaly, they could see a vast, dark expanse dotted with stars. It wasn't Earth. A figure stepped through the wormhole, its form humanoid but impossibly tall and wrapped in glowing metallic robes. Its eyes, or what Lena assumed were its eyes, glowed with an eerie blue light. "You have awakened what should have remained dormant," the figure said, its voice resonating like the tolling of a bell. "The gates of Thoth were sealed to protect your world from ours." Lena's mouth went dry. Who are you?" "We are the keepers of the gates," the being replied. "Your ancestors understood the balance of the cosmos. But your kind has forgotten." Elias stepped forward, his voice steady. "If these gates are dangerous, why build them at all?" The keeper tilted its head, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Because there was once harmony between our worlds. But that time has passed. Close the gates, or face the consequences." The wormhole flickered, and the figure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. 4 hours after the encounter, Lena and Elias argued about what to do. The implications were staggering. Were the gates truly a threat, or was the keeper simply trying to scare them? Lena couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Why had the ancient Egyptians built these gates in the first place? And why had they been abandoned? She made a decision. "I'm going to activate the next gate," she said, her voice firm. Elias stared at her. "Lena, you can't." "I have to," she interrupted. "We've already opened Pandora's box. The only way to understand the danger is to face it." The following day, Lena and Elias traveled to the Temple of Karnak, the next site in the network. As they calibrated their equipment, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. When the wormhole activated this time, it was different. The distortion wasn't a shimmering oval, it was a massive, pulsing sphere, crackling with energy. Through it, they saw a barren wasteland, lit by a blood-red sky. Shapes moved in the distance, humanoid but twisted, their forms radiating malice. "This is what they were warning us about," Elias whispered. Lena swallowed hard. She knew they couldn't stop now. Whatever lay on the other side of these gates, it was already starting to seep through, and they were the only ones who could stop it. The sphere pulsed, emitting a low, guttural hum that seemed to rattle the air around them. Lena's instincts screamed at her to shut it down, but she hesitated. There was something deeply compelling about the view through the wormhole, an answer to a question humanity had never dared to ask. Elias grabbed her arm. "Lena, we have to seal it now." You saw what came through the last gate. We don't know what's on the other side of this one. She nodded, reluctantly moving to power down the equipment, when a voice, a deep, resonant sound that bypassed her ears and spoke directly to her mind, echoed from the wormhole. Do not fear us. Both Lena and Elias froze. The shapes in the distance had drawn closer, revealing themselves. They were humanoid but grotesque, with elongated limbs and segmented metallic-like skin that shimmered in the red light. Their faces were blank, except for glowing slits where eyes should have been. We were once like you. Explorers. Seekers. The gates were our legacy, left for those who dared to step beyond the limits of their world. Lena hesitated, her hands trembling on the controls. If you were like us, then what happened to your world? Why does it look like this? The closest figure stepped forward, its gait unervingly fluid, like mercury flowing in a human shape. We overreached. We sought to harness what lay beyond the gates, but the forces we awakened were greater than we understood. This is what remains, a cautionary tale carved into the fabric of space-time. Your ancestors sealed these gates to save your world from the same fate. Lena's heart pounded in her chest. If they sealed them, why leave instructions to reopen them? Why leave the equations at all? The figure tilted its head, the slits of light flickering in what might have been amusement. Because knowledge is a double-edged sword. The gates were meant to unite, to allow for an exchange of wisdom between worlds. But they are also a test. Those who wield them must prove they are ready. Elias shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. This is madness, Lena. We can't trust them. Lena turned to him, her mind racing. What if this is why the temples were built in the first place? Not just as warnings but as a way to guide us, to give us a choice about whether we're ready for what's out there. Elias pointed at the landscape beyond the gate. Does that look like something we're ready for? Before Lena could respond, the sphere rippled violently, as if reacting to their conversation. The air grew thick, and the hum of the wormhole deepened into a rumble. The figures in the distance stopped moving, their glowing eyes fixed on something behind Lena and Elias. A sudden chill ran down Lena's spine. Slowly, she turned. Emerging from the shadows of the temple was another figure. Unlike the beings from the wormhole, this one was unmistakably human, or at least it appeared so. He was tall, draped in intricate robes that shimmered like starlight, and his eyes glowed with a soft, golden light. Do not listen to them, the man said, his voice calm yet commanding. They are remnants of a broken cycle, desperate to escape their fate. They will say anything to lure you into opening the gates fully. Lena stared at him, her mind spinning. Who are you? The man inclined his head slightly. A guardian. My kind have watched over the gates since their creation. We were the first to use them, and we paid the price for our hubris. The temples were left to ensure that others would not repeat our mistakes. Elias stepped forward, his skepticism palpable. If you're a guardian, why didn't you intervene sooner? Why let us get this far? The man's golden eyes flickered. Because the gates are a test of wisdom and restraint. You were meant to understand their danger and stop. Instead, you chose to push forward. The wormhole pulsed again, brighter and more unstable. The figures beyond it grew restless, their forms vibrating unnaturally as if struggling against the limits of the gate. Lies, one of them hissed. We are the truth of the gates. The guardians are relics of a forgotten past, clinging to their power. Do not let them deceive you. Lena felt the weight of the moment crushing down on her. She was caught between two opposing forces, both claiming to hold the truth. One urged caution and restraint, the other promised knowledge and progress. And at the heart of it all was her discovery, the equations that had brought her here, equations that could change the course of human history. Elias grabbed her arm again, his voice urgent. Lena, shut it down. Now. The guardian stepped closer, his expression grave. Listen to him. The choice you make now will determine the fate of your world. But Lena's eyes were locked on the shimmering wormhole. In its depths, She saw not just the barren wasteland but flashes of other worlds, lush, vibrant landscapes teeming with life. The potential was staggering. "What if we can control it?" she said, her voice barely audible. "What if we can learn from their mistakes and use the gates the way they were meant to be used?" Elias shook his head. "And what if we can't? What if we bring that?" He gestured toward the wasteland. "Here?" Before Lena could respond, the wormhole surged, its energy crackling like thunder. The figures on the other side began to move again, their forms twisting as they pressed against the boundary of the gate. The Guardian raised a hand, a golden barrier appearing between the wormhole and the humans. "You must decide now," he said, his voice sharp. "Seal the gate, or I will do it for you." Lena's hands hovered over the controls, her mind a whirlwind of fear, hope, and doubt. She knew that once she shut the gate, the opportunity might never come again. But leaving it open felt like standing on the edge of an abyss, daring the darkness to swallow her whole. Her finger hovered over the power switch. And then, with a trembling breath, she made her choice. The wormhole flickered, the energies around it reaching a fever pitch. What Lena chose in that moment would ripple through the fabric of reality, setting the stage for either salvation or destruction. But as the sphere began to shift, as the figures beyond it moved closer, the story of the gates was far from over. The wormhole pulsed one final time, brighter than ever, then began to stabilize. The crackling energy faded, replaced by an eerie, deafening silence. Lena's hand hovered over the controls, her decision made but the consequences unknown. She had chosen to leave it open. The Guardian's golden eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. "You do not understand what you've done," he said, his voice heavy with both sorrow and warning. "The gates were meant to remain dormant. You have awakened forces that even we cannot fully contain." Elias's face was pale, his disbelief etched into every line. "Lena, are you insane? You've just jeopardized everything. The entire planet." But Lena wasn't listening to him anymore. Her gaze was locked on the wormhole, which had expanded into a massive, shimmering portal. Beyond the distorted edges, the barren wasteland had faded, replaced by something entirely different, a brilliant cityscape of impossible architecture. Towering spires floated in midair, connected by luminous bridges of light. Figures moved within the city, their forms indistinct but undeniably alive. It was breathtaking and terrifying. The voice from beyond the gate returned, no longer a single entity but a chorus. "You have passed the first threshold. The gates are now attuned to your world. Step through, and the truth will be revealed." Elias grabbed Lena by the shoulders, shaking her. "Don't you dare step through that thing. We don't know what's on the other side. For all we know, they're lying to us." Lena's heart raced. Everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed of, was right in front of her. This wasn't just an experiment anymore. It was the discovery of a lifetime. Yet the warnings echoed in her mind. The Guardians, the wasteland, the mysterious figures, they all pointed to a greater danger. And then the choice was taken from her. The shimmering energy of the wormhole surged outward, enveloping Lena, Elias, and the Guardian in a blinding wave of light. The air around them warped, and the temple walls seemed to dissolve into nothingness. When the light faded, they were no longer in the temple of Karnak. They stood on the edge of the luminous city. The air was warm and strangely heavy, filled with a faint hum that seemed to come from the ground itself. The city's spires towered above them, their surfaces pulsing with light that shifted and flowed like liquid metal. The figures Lena had seen through the wormhole were now visible, their forms humanoid but distinctly alien. Their features were sleek and angular, their skin a translucent blend of colors that shimmered with every movement. The Guardian stepped forward, his golden eyes scanning the surroundings. "This is not possible. The gates were not designed to transport physical beings without consent." One of the alien figures approached them, its movements smooth and deliberate. It stopped a few feet away, studying Lena with an expression that seemed almost curious. "You are the first in millennia to cross the threshold," the alien said, its voice melodic and layered, like multiple harmonies speaking at once. Your kind has always stopped before taking this step. Tell us, what drives your boldness? Lena hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. I wanted to understand. The gates, your technology, your civilization, it could change everything for us. I couldn't let fear hold me back. The alien tilted its head, as if considering her words. Courage and curiosity are admirable traits, but they are not always sufficient. Another alien figure approached, this one larger and more imposing. It spoke in a deeper, more resonant tone. You have awakened the network. The gates are now fully active, connecting your world to countless others. But with this awakening comes responsibility. Elias stepped forward, his fear giving way to anger. Responsibility. You've dragged us here without warning. What do you expect us to do now? The larger alien's gaze shifted to him. You misunderstand. You were not dragged here. The gate responded to your intentions. It is a conduit of will as much as energy. Your presence here signals that your kind is ready, or believes it is. The Guardian, who had remained silent until now, spoke with a sharp edge. They are not ready. Their world is divided, their people reckless. They will misuse the gates as we did, and they will suffer the same fate. Lena turned to the Guardian, frustration boiling over. Then why not guide us? If you've already made these mistakes, help us avoid them. Don't just stand there condemning us. The Guardian's expression darkened. Because guidance is not enough. The gates reveal the true nature of those who use them. They amplify ambition, greed, and fear as much as they do wisdom and unity. You cannot be told how to wield this power. You must prove it. Before Lena could respond, the ground beneath them began to vibrate. The luminous city flickered, its light dimming. The hum in the air grew louder, turning into a deep, ominous drone. The alien figures exchanged glances, their movements now tense. What's happening? Lena asked, panic creeping into her voice. The larger alien gestured toward the horizon, where a dark, swirling mass was rising. The awakening of the gates has drawn attention. There are those who would use this power not to connect but to consume. The Guardian's golden eyes blazed. You see now why the gates were sealed. The balance of worlds is delicate, and the gates disrupt it. If this incursion is not stopped, your world will become a battlefield. Elias grabbed Lena's arm. We have to go back. Shut it all down before it's too late. But Lena couldn't look away from the dark mass, which was growing larger and closer by the second. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. The gates had opened a door, and something terrible had stepped through. She turned to the aliens. What can we do? How do we stop this? The smaller alien stepped forward, its shimmering form seeming to pulse with urgency. The gates must be recalibrated, their connections severed temporarily. But the process is dangerous. It requires both knowledge of the equations and a willingness to risk everything. The Guardian stared at Lena, his gaze piercing. The knowledge you sought has brought you here. Now you must decide if you are willing to bear its cost. The dark mass was almost upon them, its edges writhing with chaotic energy. Lena felt the weight of the decision crushing her once again. The gates were a bridge to endless possibilities, but they had also unleashed a force that could destroy everything she held dear. And this time, there might be no going back.